Hello and good afternoon everyone. Welcome to our first Cruise Express Connection get-together. This is Hardy.
And I'm Meg. Hi. We are delighted to be with you this afternoon at this happy hour. We hope that you've settled in with your drink of choice, whether it's a cocktail or a cuppa, or in our case, a glass of wine. It's been an eventful few weeks and months since we last did a Facebook Live post. Probably it was at sea somewhere, or at least on a ship, perhaps in Sydney Harbour. We thought it would be a great opportunity today to recap the weeks and months that have flown by, it seems, since the terrible Covid-19 pandemic hit us. And perhaps talk a little bit about some of the things we've been up to, some of the things that have happened over that time, and also perhaps what the future might look like. So Hardy, perhaps it would be fitting to start with how Covid-19 impacted you and your group in Antarctica.
It's a long story, but in a nutshell, I had a group in Antarctica, and of course our little friend was with us, and we went to see one spot with 250,000 pairs of penguins. Absolutely amazing. So we did an incredible trip, an expedition cruise on a small ship, right at the edge when the tide started to turn with coronavirus. Our ship was lucky, we were clean, we were healthy, we were well, we were having a fantastic time. Danced every night, and it was hugs and kisses, and it was all really lovely and beautiful, until we came to Montevideo, Uruguay, our last port of call. That's when things started to change a little bit, because the president of Uruguay had an hour earlier decided to shut the doors. So here we are on a beautiful ship with nowhere to go. So obviously everyone is kind of concerned, and I'm trying to keep everybody happy and keep everybody informed, which I think is really, really important, that you get information flow, and ensuring passengers were safe. But I was standing on the balcony of my cabin, and I thought, oh, where are we going to end up with this, Meg? And I looked down. I was on the wharf side, so the not so pretty side of the ship at that stage. And sorry, I have to go back. During the cruise, the only news we could get was BBC.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought the number of times that I saw that Coles empty shelf with no toilet paper available, I can't tell you how many times that was played on BBC. It was made Australia world famous. Anyway, so I'm at the railing and I'm looking what's happening on the wharf. And the ship was obviously reprovisioning for the crew and new passengers to supposedly get on board. And I could see a whole pallet of toilet paper sitting in front of my cabin. So I was very pleased with that. But then I looked a little bit further, and this really, really made me happy, a whole pallet of French champagne. So I thought, okay, we should be right for another week. So we ended up making a quick dash over to Buenos Aires. When we left the wharf in Montevideo, Argentina had not closed the borders yet. The office team had worked day and night to get tickets issued for us to come home from Buenos Aires. But by the time we got across the river, Argentina also closed the doors. So here we were on a fabulous ship and nowhere to go. So eventually we got the news that we would be heading for Brazil, because Brazil had at this stage not closed the borders, and the president of Brazil made that big mistake of not cutting down, not shutting down and locking down for it. So the captain announced it would take us a week, because he had to be very careful with the fuel, just in case we couldn't get any fuel anywhere else. It's not so easy to go shopping for fuel when you're at sea. So we had a beautiful week cruising along the South American coastline and obviously enjoying French champagne, more canapes, and a fabulous week actually because we came into the sunshine. It was warmer, you know, so we could actually use the pool, which was beautiful. So before we got to Rio de Janeiro, and this really, really concerned me, the captain made an announcement that if Brazil would knuckle down on us, the next port of call would be the home port for the cruise line, and we would go all the way across transatlantic. I've always wanted to do this, but maybe on a bigger ship perhaps on that one, to France. And at this stage France was really hard hit with the virus. So we got to Rio and coaches were waiting for us. The crew equipped us with hand sanitizer, gloves, masks, and coaches were waiting. We jumped on the coach, we went to the airport, and there was one flight departing, which was our flight to Dubai. We came home the long way. We made it to Dubai, and then in Dubai, I don't know whether any of you have ever seen Dubai airport, it's massive. The boards of departure flights, massive, massive boards with hundreds of flights showing. Ours was way up the top, and it said delayed by 12 hours. And I thought, not nice. But then I looked further down, and every other flight had been cancelled at that stage. So we were very, very blessed to be able to get on that very last flight from Dubai to Australia. And none of us got infected along the way. My saving grace was that I did not have to go into hotel lockdown. I think that would have been very hard to take 2 weeks in a hotel room. I went home and I don't have any weeds in the garden at the moment. It's fabulous. So I've got a lot of weeding and gardening done and baking and all the rest of it. But it sure was an adventure. But the feedback from the client now, in hindsight, we were very, very lucky. We were very, very happy the way it was handled by us and the cruise line. And they all said it was the most amazing adventure of a lifetime to go and walk between penguins. Oh, I'm getting goosebumps.
Having had the opportunity to travel to Antarctica myself last season, it's just the most amazing experience, and it's very hard to put it into words. I think the feelings you get being that far away from civilization and just completely surrounded by nature.
But it was a double whammy because I knew what was happening in the office at home. So whilst I've had this worry about getting my group home, I knew we had a group in Norway at that very time for the Northern Lights. Meg, tell us about the rescue mission there.
Yeah, so as Heidi says, whilst we were doing everything possible to bring the group home from Antarctica, we had a similar situation developing in Norway. So we had a group that had headed up there to see the Northern Lights. Obviously winter time is the perfect time to see the Northern Lights. They'd had a fabulous week, a couple of days in Oslo, and then they did the beautiful Flam Railway journey across to Bergen. And as the group arrived in Bergen, we were starting to get messages from our local contacts there and our tour manager that the Norwegian government was seriously looking at locking down their border. So it was a very frantic couple of days and very long nights, obviously, with the time differences between here and Norway.
Friday the 13th?
Friday the 13th. I don't think I'll ever forget it. But our team was just amazing. You know, they worked across the entire weekend, well into the nights, to make all of the arrangements that were necessary to bring the group from Bergen back to Oslo, and then to get everyone onto flights back to Australia as quickly as possible. We finally got the message that the border of Norway was closing at 8 a.m. on the Monday morning, and the last of our clients flew out that morning on their way home. So Very, very pleased to get everybody out. Otherwise, who knows, they may very well still be sitting in hotel rooms in Oslo or wherever. But I think the fantastic thing was that we were, as Heidi said, able to get people home in time to actually go back to their homes and do that 14-day self-isolation or self-quarantine in the comfort of their own homes, surrounded by family or neighbours or friends, which was, I'm sure, a comfort given the ordeal of rushing home as they had to.
One mentioned the ship, but I had a really lovely story that I want to share with you. Beautiful couple of travellers of ours, Ken and Jane, many cruises with us, came in on that particular sailing into Sydney Harbour that became world famous, of course. Ken and Jane went home and actually took ill with the virus. Apparently got over it quite quickly and recovered quite fast. And the first thing that Ken did when he was better, he rang up Tina in our aeronaut office to make another cruise booking. And I think that goes to show that we are still in love with cruising. You know, our love and passion for cruising, small ship, big ship, you know, we're passionate about it, and I'm sure it will come back.
In the meantime, there's still a lot of work to do. Unfortunately, we're still finding or having cruise lines cancel departures on a fairly frequent basis, and there's now obviously a huge backlog of refunds to process as the funds start to flow back. And I think that's perhaps one of the most frustrating things for you, I'm sure, our clients, but equally for our staff here in the office, that the refund process is taking a much longer time than we expected it to. But then the world has never seen something like this. The travel industry has never had to handle mass cancellations on all forms of transport across the entire globe. And of course, all the while, with so many of us working from home, at least for a period of time, many of us were sort of pretty much in lockdown, and parts of the world still are. So, you know, that sort of adds to the complexity of the situation as well. But I did want to just let everybody know that our team is working day by day through the cancellation process, working very closely with the major cruise lines, with our airline partners and so on. And particularly in the last week or so, we've started to see a good flow of refunds back to us. And we're doing our very best to turn those around as quickly as we can, knowing that it's important that we return those funds to you as quickly as possible too.
So Meg, that's the past, the present. Tell us about the future.
If only I had a crystal ball. And I'm sure
I've heard that a lot of times lately. That's coming out all the time.
Absolutely.
The crystal ball.
So what we can tell people is that there's a huge amount of work going on behind the scenes at the moment, both across the world and much closer to home. The cruise lines and cruise line organisations such as CLIA, which is Cruise Lines International Association, they have a major office here in Sydney as well as other parts of the world. They're working very, very closely with health authorities, with other government departments, and even internally to come up with a new set of even stricter protocols, if you like, when it comes to cruising, that obviously relate to the safe embarkation of passengers, sanitation on board, air conditioning systems, all those sorts of things that you know potentially might harbour
less passengers on board?
Well, that's another thing. Yes, quite possibly the cruise lines will sail with fewer passengers, at least for a period of time, whilst they bed these sorts of protocols down, and also to just be able to give that social distancing or meet those social distancing obligations that might still be in place. So there's a lot of work being done.
I guess this might disappoint some of you, but I think the buffets will disappear largely too on board the ships, huh?
Well, at least for a period of time, that could very well be the case, yeah. And obviously we're extremely hopeful for a summer season down under. Generally the ships are back from about October onwards, and we haven't yet had any definite word as to whether that will be a possibility or not. We're very, very hopeful. We have fingers crossed that we will at least see some ships here in our waters at some point across the summer. But we certainly are watching that all very closely. We're in touch with a lot of our cruise line partners, and we'll be sure to let you know more as the information comes to us.
I guess that makes smaller ships even more popular now, and it's most likely that the smaller ships will actually return much faster than the big ships. We've already had news that a couple of ships, in particular in the Kimberley region, are already operating again, starting up. So the focus, of course, this year will probably remain on the domestic market and the Kimberleys, fabulous region to cruise. Coastal areas, just been announced a lovely cruise from Melbourne to Perth or Fremantle. Sub-Antarctic, interesting spot. If you don't want to fly all that way to Antarctica, which is usually reached from South America, you can actually just go and visit the neighbours, go to New Zealand, and you can actually cruise from New Zealand to the sub-Antarctic islands. So you're seeing amazing wildlife, very similar to what you would see in Antarctica. The only thing you're not going to see are icebergs. There's no ice there, so it's going to be much warmer. But a fabulous opportunity to get a taste of Antarctica so close to home.
Absolutely.
So I think that's something to look out for, the sub-Antarctic. I think...
well, I think it's also likely that we'll see some new itineraries popping up with the smaller ships, as you say, Hardy. Possibly we'll see some intensive Tasmanian cruising on the small ships. There's likely to be more coastal cruising, perhaps travelling sort of up further north into the Queensland islands and to the sort of Cape York area.
Arnhem Land.
Yep. So I mean, it all remains to be seen at this point, but absolutely the cruise lines are looking at every opportunity, especially knowing that many people will not necessarily be keen to be rushing overseas again. It's not too far afield. New Zealand, of course, is looking like a much safer option and a more realistic option for us in the short term. So lots of itinerary planning and new opportunities coming our way.
Well, so we've started to reinvent ourselves a little bit as well, haven't we?
Yeah.
The team at Cruise Express has been working quite hard on some wonderful rail heritage tours. We're operating these tours in conjunction with rail societies. So they're like a little club of enthusiasts that are maintaining these unique pieces of machinery to the nth degree, and we will be taking several trains out, even as close as this year. Starting in September. This is all providing social distancing will kind of disappear a little bit, because of course on a train, if you have everybody on board, you are getting quite close to each other. And that's allowed, isn't it? So we've got some really nice trips planned. The first one in September, we'll be heading down to our capital city, to Canberra. It will be springtime in Canberra, so the tulips will be there. I think they have not announced an official Floriade this year.
No, they're calling it Floriade Reimagined. So those of you who might have been to Floriade in the past will remember the mass plantings in Commonwealth Park, right on the lake's edge. But this year, I think it's fantastic. The community has been encouraged to ask for a supply of bulbs to plant in their own suburbs, in their own parts of the city.
Okay.
So whilst you won't have the mass plantings that you might have seen photographs of, or you might have actually seen in person, there'll be flowers all over the city. So it'll be spectacular.
Should be pretty.
Yeah.
Then continue on into October. We'll actually be doubling up. We're going to run 2 trips to Griffith, to the Riverina. The trips are themed Taste Riverina Food and Wine Festival, and I have to say that's a trip that's really on my heart. People in the Riverina area in particular have been suffering the drought. Then next thing was the bushfires. They have been absolutely devastated with all what Mother Nature had in store for them. And beautiful lunch in the farmyard, and it's always just the best day out. It's absolutely fantastic. Something that comes back straight away to me is last year we did the trip to the Riverina, and on the way back we stopped at a private home. The owner had planted a few rows of wine which you can taste and purchase, but we have lunch there, and he invites some of the local growers to bring their produce. And I was talking to a guy that's got a dairy, and he makes his own cheese. The cheese is to die for, unbelievable. So I said to him, so tell me, how is things down here? You know, how are you coping with the drought and whatever else is going on? And he said, yeah, I went to the markets last Saturday, didn't sell one piece of cheese. I said, let me get to work. He didn't have one piece of cheese left by the time our train left. And the cheese was all wrapped up in an ice box, in an esky. So it was chilled all the way to Sydney. And on the platform, everyone came to pick up their little cheese parcel. And it felt really good. It felt really good to actually take some money to the country, you know, which we city slickers often forget. So it's a really feel-good trip. And of course, you know, wine tastings. We go to some beautiful vineyards. We do wine tastings. We have very special dinner. We go to another three young kids, maybe not so young anymore, 30s, 2 guys and 1 girl, Griffith kids that left Griffith and went overseas. Started working in kitchens all over the world, and then decided we want to go home and cook at home. And they cook the most beautiful homemade Italian food like grandmother used to do. And it's a brilliant night. Absolute brilliant night. So that's something to look out for. There's only a few seats left on those trips, but be quick if that's something that takes your fancy. We're also working on further releases, such as a trip to Machi in November, and I think we're getting close to finalizing that. But then we've also added some amazing steam trains to this. And one of those steam trains will take us to Jenolean Caves. And that's really a trip down memory lane for many of you. You know, I remember going to Jenolean Caves 39 years ago and never been back. And it would be just great to go back and see the lovely old Caves house. A very nostalgic trip, and I think very special because Caves house is due to shut down for renovations as of June. And I don't know, this could be a long-term and long-time project to get Caves House back up and running as a more 5-star property. It has lost none of its charm. It's still beautiful. It's really old world. Run by the National Park, so fantastic people that you work with and you talk to. Something that should really be a great weekend away. So it's full steam ahead for that one, and stay tuned, there's lots more in the pipeline.
And so I think tucked in amongst that, we've also found a date in the calendar for our annual client celebration in Sydney. We announced that I think a week or so ago. It's going to be on the 17th of October, which is a Saturday. We'll pretty much always get together on a Saturday for that event. And we're kind of staying a little tight-lipped, aren't we, about exactly what we're up to. But we figure as we can't travel the world in the way that we normally would, we would take everybody on a trip around the world in 180 minutes. So it'll be a 3-hour function, and our challenge is to bring you the world in that time. So We look forward to having you join us that day. It's going to be a great opportunity for everybody to get together. Those of you who know one another, those of you who've travelled with Heidi or some of our other wonderful tour managers before, Warren and Adriana and others as well. As always, we'll provide a beautiful lunch. The wine will be flowing, and we will, as always, have some special entertainment. So.
And it's really amazing. They're becoming quite something, our reunions. You know, they're always a wonderful day to catch up with friends and people you travelled with, share your travel stories. I know one friend that's flying in from Brisbane, and we've also got one friend that's possibly coming all the way from Perth to be at the reunion get-together.
Fantastic.
So that's a really nice opportunity. Yeah, the show I think will be special. Sorry, I'm going to promise you I'm not going to be on stage this year, or at least not necessarily dressed up, looking silly as we normally do. It will be a professional show. There'll be some lovely tunes, and I think there's going to be a bit of a sing-along, and it's going to be brilliant. And I'm really pleased to say we've got Silver Sea, a small ship cruise operator, very 5-star, coming along to actually sponsor this show on board, which helped us make the actual luncheon make it happen, but also make it very reasonable. $99, 3 hours of wine, dine, and be on one of the most beautiful harbours in the world, of course.
Now, we were going to just check if there were any questions people might have. If you don't mind, I'm just going to have a very quick look. Kathy's actually been helping us out whilst we've been online, and she's been answering some of your questions already, which is fantastic.
Well, I may as well just start talking about, we will be back next week. We want to make this a regular event, our Cruise Express Connections. And next week, next Thursday, same time, same place, new pictures. We would like to talk about small ships cruising close to home, and in particular touch onto expedition cruising, which I think a lot of more mature travellers sort of say, oh, expedition cruising, that sounds too adventurous and may not be for them. I'd like to talk to you about that.
Sounds fantastic.
Well,
so in the meantime,
keep dreaming travel.
Keep dreaming travel.